Hey short man, is your brain as small as you?
My brain is this big.
Then let's test it.
Alright, bring it.
Okay short man,
I am not short.
look in a mirror sometime. If you can reach one. This is hot.
Alright, what question is first?
What is diffusion?
When you jump over a rock in different paths than you are using.
What?
When you jump over a...
No. Diffusion is when particles travel from a crowded area to a less crowded area.
What are you talking about? You mean diffusion happens when a person moves from a crowded area to a less crowded area? Like if someone moves from New York to Alaska?
Are you crazy? Diffusion happens in a cell.
In a jail cell. How would diffusion happen in a jail cell?
No. It's those microscopic little boxes working in your body.
You mean there are people in prison inside our bodies? I never knew I was so bad.
How about I tell you a little more about how it works?
Fine.
Particles travel from a crowded area to a less crowded area. You got that, right? Another way of describing diffusion is by saying diffusion is the movement of particles either into or outside of a cell. Diffusion always happens around the cell membrane. An example of diffusion is when food coloring initially is dropped into a glass of water. There is initially a high concentration of food coloring in the area that the dye touches the water. In the rest of the glass, there is no food coloring in the water. After time, the dye molecules mix randomly with the water. Finally, the dye is spread evenly and the concentration of food coloring is the same throughout the water.
Alright. I bet you don't know what osmosis is.
Osmosis. Ha! That is an easy thing to describe.
In your dreams. And you still would not get it right there.
Okay. Osmosis is when water particles specifically move to a less concentrated area from a higher concentrated area. A simpler version is the movement of water either into or out of a cell. The key for osmotic balance is that there should be a state of equilibrium between the solute and the water molecule. As long as the solute balance is the same on both sides of the cell membrane, the amount of water entering the cell will be the same as the amount of water leaving the cell. If the state of osmotic balance changes so that there is more solute on one end of the cell membrane, more water molecules will migrate to the other side of the cell membrane until osmotic balance is achieved.
Huh. You are incorrect. You are incorrect.
Then what is osmosis?
Osmosis is when you are in the North African desert, conquering new territories, and you suddenly come across a flowing stream of cool, fresh water.
I think that is a different word. Maybe oasis.
Dang it. So, I guess you are right. Am I still Cupid?
You mean stupid, right?
Yes.
No, you aren't that stupid. Just not that smart.
Whatever. Just get on with the test.
Okay. I doubt you'll ever get this one. What is active transport?
When you transport French infidels in an armored vehicle to a jail facility.
What?
And passive transport is when you roll the French infidels down the hill to the jail.
No. First of all, active transport is when small particles travel across a cell membrane with the use of the cell's energy from areas of low concentration to higher concentration. This is opposite the normal flow of particles, which is why energy is needed to move the particle.
Kind of like salmon swimming upstream?
Yes, kind of. A better example would be a sodium-potassium pump using energy called ATP to move sodium and potassium ions across the cell membrane against the concentration gradient. Are you with me? Passive transport is when small particles move across the cell membrane without the use of energy. Particles will move from areas of high concentration to low concentration. Do you know two examples of passive transport?
Diffusion and osmosis.
Yes. By George, I think you're getting it.
I think my head is starting to hurt.
That's because your helmet is on too tight. No circulation is going on up there.
You keep talking about small particles. Do you have an issue with smaller, shorter things? What about larger particles?
Good point, Mr. Little Man. I mean Mr. Napoleon. In active transport, larger particles are moved across the cell through the process of endocytosis and exocytosis. Endocytosis brings particles like food particles into the cell. In endocytosis, the cell comes into contact with a large particle such as a large protein. The cell membrane begins to wrap around the particle. Once the particle is completely surrounded by the cell, a vesicle pinches off.
That sounds precisely like how I conquered Egypt in 1798. Are you copying off of me?
I think the process of endocytosis existed long before you began your imperialistic invasion of Egypt.
Whatever. What about this exciting ptosis?
That's exocytosis. When large particles such as waste leave the cell uses an active transport process called exocytosis. During exocytosis, a vesicle forms around a large particle within the cell. The vesicle carries the particle through the cytosol to the plasma membrane. The vesicle fuses with the cell membrane and explodes the particle to the outside of the cell. With the materials now outside of the cell, the outer plasma membrane regains its shape.
Alright, did I win?
No, you failed miserably. Well, actually, it looks like you grew a foot.
I got a bigger brain.
Not exactly, but this calls for a celebration.
Oh yeah.
Friends.
Oh yeah.